Tafska. I'm here with Taylorsville Crime Watch, and we're here with Ben Jackson, the trustee of Columbus, Indiana. And what does it mean, Ben, what does it mean to you to be the Columbus trustee, and what does a trustee do for Columbus?
I love my job. I get up every morning and I get to be the Columbus Township Trustee, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Of the 12 townships of Bartholomew County, I'm the only one. Columbus Township is the only township that has a full-time trustee. I do this as a full-time job. I get paid to do it. I have an office and office staff that's open Monday through Friday. Of all the townships in Bartholomew County, Columbus Township has about 7% of Bartholomew County's population. And we probably have even a greater percentage of its lower income population. So through this office, we administer everything the township does. The biggest thing through this office we do is Township Assistance. People that can't do not have the resources to meet their basic necessities. In state law, the legislature has defined what the basic necessities are. But we also administer everything the township does out of this office. So it's not just Township Assistance, what used to be called poor relief, now it's called Township Assistance. I'm also responsible for fire protection for the portions of Columbus Township that aren't within the city of Columbus. And that's really unique in Bartholomew County because most of Columbus Township is in the city. But I'm responsible for fire protection of the portions that aren't covered by the city of Columbus's fire department, by CFD. But I'm also responsible for maintaining all the abandoned cemeteries. And it's not just the common definition of abandoned, there's a legal definition, one that no one else is taking care of. There's 9 in Columbus Township right now that we maintain. We maintain the insurance on and pay a mowing crew to mow it and ensure the tombstones and the fences and make sure the trees are taken care of. And then within Township Assistance, we also help families that cannot pay to bury their loved ones. And Columbus Township actually owns a cemetery, so it's not really an abandoned one, an active one, called Landlord Cemetery up at Mar Road and 400 North. Columbus Township owns that. And so if someone comes in, we not only pay the funeral home, but we also have a grave site to give them. We have a cemetery where we can bury people if they're Columbus Township residents. And so we administer all that. I'm also in charge of, like I said, fire protection is a portion. We actually have a firehouse over off Rep near East, Rep Drive near where Mar Road and State Street cross. And the odd thing about it is, and that tells you something about uniqueness and the oddity of Columbus Township's fire protection, our firehouse is not in our own fire territory. Columbus Township's fire department, their building, the first responder is Columbus Fire Department. We're actually in city limits, even though we don't cover that area. Because we cover the 4 corners. You can think of Columbus Township, Bartholomew County, as a center square and a tic-tac-toe board. It's not exactly a square, but you think of it that. And then the city of Columbus is a circle within that square. It's not really a circle, it's more of a spider or an amoeba, but just think of it. And we have the 4 corners. So the county fairgrounds are in Columbus Township, but they're not in the city of Columbus. Lowell Bridge is in Columbus Township, but it's not in the city of Columbus. Go down Hackman's Farm, the intersection of State Road 31 and State Road 7. Those are in Columbus Township and not in the city of Columbus. And then up where Landlord Cemetery is, up where Mar Road and 400 North, just east of the airport there, that's Columbus Township, right outside of city limits. So we have to protect those areas, but not everything in between them. And so it's just it's an odd fire protection territory that we have. We contract with East Columbus Independent Fire Department to provide that fire protection. Those are volunteers, and what many townships are finding in Indiana is during business hours, Monday through Friday, during 8 to 5, banker's hours if you will, it's very difficult for many volunteers to leave their job and respond to a fire. So the trustee, prior to me, decided to have a paid township staff, a fire department that would respond to those fires. So we're unique in that we have during the day, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning or 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon, we have full-time firefighters that are employees of Columbus Township that will respond to emergencies. The other oddity, and I am not a firefighter, no one in my family are firefighters, I don't come from that side of what townships do. But a firefighter is a little bit of an oddity because you don't really fight many fires as a firefighter. It's almost all medical runs and automobile accidents. There's a lot more EMT, the emergency medical technician, a lot more of those type of things that go on than actual structure fires or even car fires. And so it's a real problem, and every township has it. A lot of areas have it with volunteer fire departments. it's very difficult. There's an auto accident at the intersection of State Road 7 and 31 down there at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. You need somebody there right away. If someone's if someone's unconscious in a car turned upside down, or if it's your grandchild that's in the backyard in the kiddie pool that you lost track of and they're not breathing, or if it's your wife that just had a heart attack. Time is brain cells. The quicker you get there, the more likely they are to survive. The quicker you get there, the less likely they are to have permanent injuries or whatever it is. And we have sheriff's department, we have the hospital, and they all get there, but you need firefighters many times. So the previous trustee chose to pay for full-time firefighters. That costs money. So we did have 6 full-time firefighters. A couple of years ago, we took that down to 4 full-time firefighters and 2 part-time. And we're able to provide the fire protection that we need doing that. That's a big part of it. There's also a couple oddities. I'm the official township fence viewer. I've never had to do it since I became trustee. It had to do with people dividing their farmland and the fear of someone's livestock trampling someone else's crops. So if you and the farmer next to you or a dispute over a fence because his cattle keeps trampling on your corn, you come to me. If one of you refused to pay for the fence to keep the livestock or divide your property, one of them come to me, file a claim. I can file the fence, I can build the fence, then force the other person to pay me back for it. I've never had to do it. I don't know of any trustee that's ever had to do that anymore. I'm also in charge of eradicating noxious weeds within Columbus Township. And there's 4 weeds. I remember 2, Johnson grass and I think Scottish thistle. I don't remember what the other 2 are because they had Latin names. I've never had to do it. I think I don't know of any trustee that's ever had to do that. Luckily, Chris Medic, County Extension Agent, said if anyone calls me, just call her, we'll go look at it, and she'll tell me what to do. Most of the people out in the farm community know what it is, and they know how to eradicate it with herbicides. Now, I guess I don't think it's much of a problem, but in 1852, the legislature decided it was going to be a problem, and no one's gone back and taken it off trustees' list of things you're responsible for. So those are kind of minor and archaic things that we're responsible for. Specifically, outside of Township Assistance, we're also responsible for medicine and insulin. It's a whole separate section. And it's always odd, especially insulin specifically. If someone is in need of their insulin, we must act very quickly. Here in Bartholomew County, all the trustees, we have a very unique service we can use, and it's the hospital's medication assistance program. So if somebody comes in with their medication, I do not have to be on the phone with the doctor's office and the pharmaceutical company and the pharmacy trying to get their medicine. The hospital does that for everyone. The medication, it now combined with Volunteers in Medicine, the medication assistance program. Everybody can go there. They have trained nurses that can get it. Talk to the pharmaceutical companies and get free samples and get it paid for. Through funds we pay, and Love Chapel pays into it. So here in Bartholomew County we have something very unique. If you really need medicine, you'll be able to get it. So I don't have to, we don't do that too much through here. Luckily, because you could spend, literally, a person could spend all day trying to get one medicine for one person. And the nurses there that run the hospital are able to talk to doctors' offices and explain to them, look, this person can't afford any of this medicine, so how much do we, let's pare this down to what they really need. So that's a unique opportunity, and those are great ladies and guys that work in that program. It takes a lot off of my table and a lot of all the other trustees here in Bartholomew County.
It sounds like you got a huge, important job. A lot more than what a lot of people have. Well, a lot of people, we get questions, and that's why we brought that question up.
Sure.
And I even learned something today that, there's a lot more you do than I even knew about. So there's going to be a lot of education on this one. People get educated what our trustees actually do for us. All right. We had a couple of questions get emailed into us through the internet when we put it out. Let's see here. First one, Heather and Todd. Why does getting help have to be based off of income?
Well, the way it works in Indiana, the law says we are responsible for helping people meet their basic necessities if they do not have the resources to meet their basic necessities. And that's kind of a legal definition of it. But the legislature defines we have to help you pay for shelter, and not just shelter, but appropriate shelter. So we have to pay for heat and things like that. Food, medical expenses, some book expenses for schools, but it's mostly rent and food and utilities. That's the bulk of what we do. And those are the basic necessities. So we have to, when someone comes in and applies for Township Assistance, we have to look to see whether or not they had the money or other resources to meet those basic necessities. But the legislature doesn't define other things that you and I, because remember this was defined back in 1852, what you and I think of modern day necessities aren't defined as basic necessities under any other law. Whether they should or not is another question, but right now they're not. So a telephone is not considered a basic necessity. We're practical, and everybody has to have a telephone nowadays, but you don't have to have the iPhone X so you can check Facebook. That's not a basic necessity. A car, an automobile, is not a basic necessity. That being said, our better paying jobs are down in Ogleville or Wellsboro or whatever down there. So if someone has a reasonable car payment, we don't count that against them. But we do look at how much money they had. And if someone what we look at all the time is whether they had the resources to meet their basic necessities, not if they had the resources but chose to spend those on things other than the basic necessities. Because when someone gets their paycheck, they need to pay their rent, their food, their utility bill first, and then spend things, whatever's left over, for things that aren't the basic necessities. So that's where we look at the income. How much money you're spending. We look at your expenses the other side too. How big of a house you're living in, whether it's practical for your amount of income, for your size family, but then how much money you had, what you absolutely have to have, how much income you have. We try to meet the two. So we look at someone's income. Right now I think we're at 115% of the federal poverty rate is what we look at. If you're over that, we presume you're going to be able to meet your basic necessities. And there's exceptions to that. If somebody has an extraordinary circumstance, they are over that income and they've been living within their means, but they just got out of the hospital and they just lost their job, or out of the hospital and there are a bunch of extra expenses, or something like that. Sure, there's exceptions, then we make those all the time. But generally look at your income, if you have to see how much money you had, your resources. But we also look at your family, because it's not just, in Township Assistance, we don't look at it by individuals, we look at it at households. So we have to, on the application, every adult in the household has to be on the application. We have to speak to every adult in that household, and to make sure, not whether one person had enough food to feed themselves, whether all the adults had enough resource to feed all the adults and children in the household. We look at if people children have incomes, some to have from Social Security or a death benefit from a parent that's passed away or something. We look at the entire family's income, the entire household's income, the entire household's resources, and the entire household's expenses, and see whether they've used those resources to pay for the basic necessities, and we compare those two.
All right, another question we had come in. We've got a couple of these. Let's see, 3 and 4 is kind of a similar thing. How does a person get assistance for propane to cook food? And is propane considered a means for cooking and heating? So they kind of go together, I think, on that one. And that was actually 4 people asked the same question. It was Chris, Reba, Kathy, and Lonnie.
Yeah, here in Columbus, in Columbus Township, we don't have a lot of people coming in asking us to help them pay for their propane, so we haven't had a lot of experience with that. As part of shelter, we're responsible for helping people pay for their heat source, their electric or their natural gas, if that's what's needed, to heat the home. Technically, we don't have to, we're cooking on a stove is not a basic necessity. I don't know if we've ever had someone that had natural gas for their heating source, but propane for their stove, so we paid for natural gas but didn't pay for the cooking source. I imagine most people have the same. Rather than 2 lines into their home, they have LP for both, or they have natural gas for both. I don't know if we've ever needed to think through separating out your heating source from your cooking source as a basic necessity. Since I've been here in July of 2013, I think we've had 2 people in here that heated with propane. And we assist about 2,000 people a year, so we don't encounter that very much. And some of the other areas of Bartholomew County, that they may have a lot more people on LP or propane for a cooking source or heating source. We just don't encounter that very often at all. So I really don't know how to answer whether it's a cooking or heating source. Generally it'd be the same, and I can't imagine we would say we're only going to help so much because we're deducting so much because you're using some of it to cook with. I mean, saving $1.80 after 2 days of math. It isn't whatever it would end up being. we would pay for any heating source. Literally, we've had someone come in, we paid for firewood before because it was the heating source of the wood. We paid for pellets before. Whatever the heating source is, the main heating source of their home will pay. But generally, it's electric and natural gas now. It's very rare that we get someone in here, have someone come in that's heating their home with anything other than electric or natural gas. So we just don't have a lot of, it's not something we encounter very often at all.
Well, maybe they're talking about if they were homeless, because I know a lot of the homeless use propane to cook with. I don't know if you would pay for that, or the trustee's office would pay for something like that.
We don't. That's a whole different, when someone is homeless, there's a whole different way we go to assist them. And we can talk about over brighter days and how they can get food. Because that's based on the normal for heating source of your home would normally be based on where your residence is. And the main heating source of your residence. If you're homeless, you don't have a residence, the whole different area of the law and a whole different way we have jurisdiction, we have the authority to help you. We don't, and we've never paid a propane bill for someone because they're homeless. We've assisted them in other ways where they can get into some place where they can get warm food without having to cook it themselves out at a campsite or something.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. This came in from Emily and Brad. Why does it take so long to receive help from after you qualify?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what so long is supposed to mean. Generally what happens is folks will come in and they'll apply for Township Assistance. It's a long state-mandated form. It's 10 pages called the Application for Township Assistance. And then based on that, we'll read through it. Investigators here in my office will read through it. And then I'll have some questions. You will have written down how much income you had, so we'll need verification. Generally your bank statement or your pay stubs show that was what your income was. And then you'll have written what your expenses were, and we'll need some verification that those really were your expenses. Like a lot of times a bank statement does both. It shows how much money was deposited, how much money went out. So they have to look at that. And then based on that, they'll have some other questions, some other forms. Generally, they'll tell you what all you need. In this office, generally, they'll tell you what other documentation you need and set up a follow-up appointment. Typically, that follow-up appointment, everything is good. We'll write the vouchers. And we have to do that within 72 hours. We have to make a decision within 72 hours. The decision could be just to continue it. That you just have to make a decision. It doesn't have to be yes or no. It can still be maybe after 72 hours because the people haven't come back. Or they'll call we'll reschedule an appointment and they'll call and say, sorry, I can't make it to the next day. We just pinned it in the computer and we just wait another 24 hours to make the decision. But generally after that second appointment, the return appointment, you will have written a voucher for your landlord, a voucher for your food, a voucher if that's what if we decided you really didn't have the resources to meet your basic necessities, we are going to assist you, a voucher to Vectren or Duke or Columbus City Utilities or RMC or something. So it's usually a 3-day, 72-hour period that it takes to get assistance. And sometimes people can come back, but we have to give them we have to give them 72 hours to come up with the documentation. Okay. So generally we said it, but if people want to come back the next day and there's available in our schedule, we'll let them know. But some of it's just mandated by state. We have to. Someone claims they don't have the basic resources, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay, we have to document that. We're required to investigate it to make sure that is correct. They really didn't have the resources to meet their basic necessities, they really can't pay their rent, they really can't pay the utilities. And then from that we have to document it in the computer and then pay the vouchers. Now sometimes we'll have to give you paperwork for your landlord to sign. And we have little control over how long it takes your landlord to bring it back or for you to track down your landlord and then bring it back to us. And sometimes that may take long, especially if it's out-of-town landlords. This time of year, some people's landlords have gone south to Florida. And if they don't have a local company managing their property, sometimes it's faxes and it's mail, because they have to sign a couple forms to say, yes, this is how much they owe, yes, we're not going to evict them in the next 30 days, and yes, I'll accept your voucher. So that can be time-consuming. We work with people, we fax, we email, whatever it's necessary to speed it up. But we try to do it as quickly as possible. But sometimes there's all kinds of things that just make it take longer.
All right, Kathy and Rose would like to know, does the Columbus trustee help outside of Columbus?
Yeah, well, I like that question because people often confuse Columbus Township with the city of Columbus. People often think I work for the city of Columbus or I work for the mayor, and I don't. It's a whole different government unit, but they're both called Columbus, and people confuse the two. And there's Columbus Fire Department, and there's Columbus Township Fire and Rescue, and those get confused. So yes, we help people outside the city of Columbus, but not people outside Columbus Township. So like I said, Columbus Township is bigger than just the city of Columbus. Most of Columbus, well, about geographically, about half of Columbus Township is within city limits. Population-wise, about 85% of Columbus Township's population is within the city of Columbus. So there's a lot of space, but not a lot of people outside of the city of Columbus. So yes, we help people outside the city of Columbus, but only those that are also in Columbus Township. So we don't help people out east of town, that's Clay Township, or out west of town, that's Harrison. Up north of town is German, south of town is generally Wayne Township. We're the center square of the tic-tac-toe. It's not 9 like a tic-tac-toe board, it's 12, but we're the center square. So we do not help people outside of Columbus Township. Now that being said, every township trustee has the authority to help any transients that are coming through the area, and we do help them occasionally. They're not really a resident of any township. 2 or 3 times every winter, the county sheriff or the police will bring somebody in here. Hasn't happened yet too much this winter, but last winter there's an elderly gentleman walking down US 31 barefoot. He was walking from Chicago to Atlanta. Wasn't a resident of anywhere. He was alright, they brought him in. We got him some food. I think he ended up staying at Brighter Days for the night. He was actually going to his sister's. We called, and his sister really was expecting him. Said he had called her from Chicago about a month before, and he does this about every winter. But we got him with Love Chapel. They got him a cab ride back up to the Greyhound station in Annapolis, and we got him a Greyhound ticket to Atlanta. So we do help people, particularly transients, and there's a specific law in Indiana statutes that says we are not obligated, but we may assist a transient assist them to get back to wherever their legal residence is, and we do that. But that's an exception. That's not, townships are very specific geographically, and we're charged with assisting those within that geographic region. But Columbus and Columbus Township are often confusing to many folks, so it's kind of a yes and no answer.
Well, if they have questions, they can call
Sure.
here.
They can always call here, and we can tell you, and we can look it up. It's a very distinct square, and we look it up all the time on Google exactly. And what is interesting is US 31. You go south of town, and it's confusing all the time. You go down US 31, it goes Columbus Township, it goes through a corner of Clay Township, then back into Columbus Township again before it finally goes into Sand Creek Township down there. So in the middle of US 31, a couple of those trailer parks, 2 of the 7 that are on there, 2 of them are in Clay Township, the other one, so we have to look it up all the time. Because literally your neighbor is in a different township than you are. And then on down, the township line goes again. So it's odd. We look it up all the time. Call us and we can tell you if it's not even Columbus Township, exactly what other township you're in.
Okay. Sarah, what are the biggest challenges facing your township, and how would you address them?
Our biggest challenge is probably our fire protection district. It's odd, it's the 4 corners, but not the middle. And so that provides unique challenges. We looked up the other day, we really didn't, it was for a grant, fire chief and I, and we actually have very little population in the area of our fire protection. It looks like we only have about 1,800, 2,000 people that live out in Columbus Township. That's not the city of Columbus. But what we do have is a lot of people driving through it. So if there's an accident at US 31 and State Road 7, I always like the intersection, we still have to respond to it, but they're not Columbus Township residents. Mostly they might live in Seymour and be driving to Taylorsville to work. Or they might be driving they might be going down to Southern Crossing to go over to Wellsboro or something. So we have a lot of people, we have a lot more people during the work day in Columbus Township than we do sleeping here at night. It's only people sleeping here at night that are the residents. But we have a lot of people that work in Columbus Township and are coming to work in the city of Columbus that drive through Columbus Township, whether it's up State Road 11, up 31 and 7, down 31, or in Mar Road, or in, well, 46 goes literally in the city of Columbus, so there's not any part of 46 out there, but Clay Township has a lot of people that drive through that. That's one of the biggest challenges of how to provide EMT and fire protection when you have low residents but huge amount of commuters. Because we're still responsible for it, and we certainly don't want someone to die waiting for a fire department or someone to respond to an auto accident someplace. but we don't have the tax, but we don't have a lot of tax base, a lot of residents to pay for that. And so it's very expensive, and we have very few little property and very few residents. We have a very small tax base for very expensive service, and that's always a problem. And it's probably going to come, every township in Indiana is coming more and more to grips with that. Fire protection, which of course isn't a lot of fire protection, especially EMT and auto accidents. A lot of those get very expensive, and that's a constant problem, how to pay for very expensive public safety expenses with a very small tax base. That's probably, I don't know. How do I address it? Keep trying to pay for it. I don't know what the solution is. We talk about it a lot. I really don't know. We're doing a really good job right now. We just lowered taxes by about 50% in Columbus Township for that area, for the fire fund. But eventually it takes money. You've got to spend money on fire protection, or you're not going to have fire protection. And that gets frustrating.
Darlene, sent a question in. Why do you go by last year's income and not what the income is at present?
Well, we don't go by necessarily last year's income. Generally, it's the last 30 days, whether you had the income in the last 30 days to meet your expenses in the last 30 days. There are a couple exceptions to that, and that's called lump sum payments. So this time of year when everyone gets their tax return, we do go back and we look back look forward for 180 days. If you get a tax return this year, and you're not going to have the income to pay for your rent, it's expected, because that's a huge resource you have, not necessarily within the last 30 days, but money you got to pay on your rent for, to pay your utilities, to pay for your food. So if you get a $10,000 tax refund in February, then you come to us in May, and you've had no income in May, but you've spent all your $10,000 tax refund on things other than your rent, we're going to look at that. We're going to ask, look, you just got a big tax refund. What did you spend all that money on? And it may be legitimate things. It might be you had to get your car repaired, your refrigerator broke, and you did pay some of your rent. But it may not. So it's not, we don't never look at a whole year's income. It's called a 180-day look back. So we look back 180 days, what lump sum payments you've gotten. But some of that might be a tax refund. It might be a student loan refund. People get student loans, they don't spend on tuition, get the money back. It's just sent to them. It might be a lawsuit or something you got. It might be a back payment for your Social Security. It might be a back payment for child support. Any lump sum payments you got, any large checks you got from any source. We look at that to see whether that was a resource and whether you use that resource to meet your basic necessities, or whether you chose to spend that resource on something other than your basic necessities. But generally it's just 30 days, and that's the most common. We look back what income you've had the last 30 days, what expenses you had, where you spent that income. If you tried to meet your basic necessities, just didn't have the resources, didn't have the income, we'll help you. If you use those resources for something other than what was the basic necessities, generally you won't say no the first time. Generally we'll say, all right, we're going to help you out, but you need to come to us and we'll help you budget your money and help you pay your rent first and utilities first, help you sign up for some benefits, help you sign up for Social Security, for SNAP, it used to be called food stamps, help you sign up for all the other programs. We can get you the medication assistance program so you don't have to spend money on your medication, and help you budget your money. If someone comes back repeatedly and they're all the time spending the money on things other than basic resources and still asking us to pay their rent, eventually we'll deny them and say, no, we're not going to spend our money so you can spend your money on something other than basic necessities.
That's a good point. Let's see, this came in from Janet and DJ. Why is it that one person is not helped, but yet another person is helped in the same situation and has the same income?
Generally, it's difficult looking at two different people, especially from the outside. I'm guessing that it's very rare that two people with the exact same situation, exact same income will be treated differently. Generally, when it looks that way from the outside, it's probably because they had different situations. You just don't know what the situation was. We try to be very consistent. And sometimes people's capacity. If someone comes in here and they're intellectually disabled, we expect less out of them. We expect them, if they're just not capable of managing their money correctly. If they have a mental illness, a cognitive disorder, a substance use disorder, we try to get them help. If someone is just using the system, I'm going to pay my cable and my phone bill because I know you'll pay the rent. and repeatedly, and we've literally had people say that. It's like, well, why'd you pay your cable and your phone bill and not your rent? Because I know you wouldn't pay those, but I know you'd pay the rent. Well, that's not the way it works. And the first time's, all right, we need to stop, we need to think about it, because you're gonna get yourself in trouble. We're gonna help you with your rent, because we don't want you to be evicted or have your utilities turned off. We don't want you to not be able to eat or she'll be able to eat, but you can't come back month after month and keep doing this. So it did, but generally it's different situations. We look at everybody differently. Sure, I mean, there's the state law, and we know what the standard is, and did you have the resource to meet the basic necessities, and we repeat that to ourselves. But we're human beings, and we know that human beings come in here, and people make mistakes, and occasionally we make mistakes. But generally we treat, I'm sure, and we talk about it all the time, I'm pretty confident, that we treat people in the same situation similarly. Many times it looks like you got denied but your neighbor got assistance. It's probably because it wasn't the same situation. You just don't know what the situation was. And it's hard. I mean, to look at other people and not be upset that they got assistance when you didn't. Generally it's because it was a different situation or actually different income. They really weren't the same situations.
Okay. David and Fred is asking, what is the qualifications to get help for rent?
Well, I mean, generally it's because you didn't, I'll say it again, you didn't have the basic necessities. You didn't have the resource to meet your basic necessities. Now, that being said, if your landlord has already filed for eviction, we are not allowed to help pay your rent, because we have to pay your rent to keep you housed for the next 30 days. Now, we are able to call landlords occasionally and say, look, we're going to pay the rent, can we get this worked out? Because if not, we're going to have a homeless family or somebody homeless, a worse situation. And sometimes they'll go down and they'll withdraw the foreclosure, the eviction papers, and then we can help them. But if you're 3 months behind, your landlord says, I don't care, I'm not taking the trustee's voucher, I'm evicting you, there's nothing we can do, because the landlord has to sign something saying, I understand by taking your voucher, I will not be evicting these people within the next 30 days. If they refuse to sign that, there's nothing we can do. We have no control over that. But generally, it's because you didn't have the resource to meet your basic necessities. You didn't have the money to pay your rent, and with everything else that you needed to pay. Not necessarily because you didn't have the money to pay everything you wanted to pay. Mm-hmm. And we work with people, explain the difference between what they want and what they need. And it's tough when you have low income and everybody else is buying things and you can't. And we work with people to understand, look, you're about ready to have your gas turned off and it's very cold outside, you're about ready to be evicted. We will help you, we've got to get this under control, we've got to figure more income and less expenses so you can meet your basic necessities, so you can pay for yourself, so you can help raise your children. But generally, for rents, because you didn't have the money to pay your rent, and you didn't order to pay for your food and your shelter and your utilities, and your landlord's willing to work with us, is not in the middle of eviction.
Okay. Let's see here. Rita and AJ, why does it take a month for an appointment when you need the help now?
Since I've been here, I don't know we've ever had a month wait on an appointment, because we have to help you within the month. Right now we can only we can't help on January, right in February, so we have to get you in. Right now it's 3 days in this office, the longest I've known is a week. But sometimes that's just your schedule. It's tough. We're open 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. If you work first shift, it's not easy to get in here because you're working almost every time. The investigators here, we've stayed open late, we've opened early, and we've come in on Saturdays if somebody really needs to meet us at that time. Other than that, some people might take up to a week because you're only off on Wednesdays, and if you call on Thursday, you're not off till the next Wednesday, so just because you can't make it, you can't get in here until next Wednesday. But I know of no one that's ever in this office that I've been here that's had to wait a month to make an appointment. And the other trustees, I don't know, and you'd have to ask them.
Okay. Rhonda and Tisha, is homelessness a huge issue for Columbus?
Yes, we have a fairly large homeless population here. Some of that's because we have very good social service agencies. United Way here is very good, and many of the social service agencies are very good at what they do. So there are some folks from other communities that come here because of that, to take advantage of our social services. we do have a problem with homelessness. We just had the point in time count, and we found quite a few more people out there. That was January 25th or 24th. We went out in the morning and tried to look everywhere where people were sleeping in the open or in cars or someplace that was not meant for human habitation. So we were down in Novel Park and under the bridge next to Burger King, or out by the Walmart. We were out walking everywhere, looking through cars and parking lots. The parking lot at Donner Park, people sleeping in cars there and trying to guess who slept someplace that wasn't meant for human habitation. And we found quite a few more this year than we had in previous years. The question is always, were they just not there? Were they there and we just didn't see them last year? Or were they just not there last year? Did it really go up? Do we really have more? Or were we just better at finding them? And you never know, because you don't do the same search.
Right.
We never go to the same place, exact same time, every year in a row. It just doesn't work that way. We found quite a bit more. We also have a different way of counting this year. We not just had the folks out in we did not just the field teams that I was part of, we had the Recovery Engagement Center that they could go to be counted. Since you open Brighter Days, that's only a night shelter. The Recovery Engagement Center is where the homeless folks in that can go during the day. So we had a representative from my office there at the Recovery Engagement Center to count them and to tell them what resources were available and give them a packet of things that they could use. Blankets and hand warmers and some food that didn't have to be cooked and things like that. But it's a huge problem. That being said, Columbus is making huge strides, and not just Columbus, Bartholomew County, this whole community is making huge strides in the amount of assistance we're giving to the homeless and what we're doing. Our goal is not to shelter the homeless, it's to house them. There's a big difference. It's not appropriate for anybody to sit in a homeless shelter for a long period of time. You need to get them moved out of the shelter, back up on their feet, and into housing. Columbus Township, our goal is to help make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. And we work on all three of those. Rare, when somebody comes in here, if they're on the verge of homelessness, we'll do just about anything we have to keep them from being homeless, if we can, to make it rare. If they end up going to Brighter Days, which is the shelter here in town for single adults, or Horizon House, which is the shelter for families, we'll try to make it as brief as possible, get them back out of the shelter and back into housing as quickly as we can. And then once they do get into housing, we try to make it non-reoccurring, which means not happen again. We try to keep them in their housing. We have a great amount of help with Centerstone. They got a pilot grant the first year from the city, and then from the city and the hospital and Heritage Fund to have actual caseworkers. The Columbus Homeless Outreach Program, they train caseworkers in mental health and substance use issues to work with the homeless. So not only do we get them in housing, but immediately after we do that, we try to get them so they can overcome their barriers, so they can either apply for Social Security or go out and be able to earn enough income to support themselves. We try to do that very quickly. With us, with Horizon House, Love Chapel, Centerstone, and now Thrive Alliance, many of us are working together. You take this portion of it, I take this portion of it, let's talk about it, so we make sure that nobody falls through the gap, falls through the crack. We're making huge strides. It's never, we want to end homelessness. That being said, ending homelessness does not mean no one's ever going to be in a housing crisis. It just means we have an effective response when it happens. With the executive director of the IHCDA, that's the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, that's where all the federal money comes to the state for homelessness and all the housing programs. He was here on the day we did the pit count to look at the Recovery Engagement Center to talk to us. We're very proud. He said this is a model program here in Columbus. There's been a lot of people working the last 5 or 6 years to get that done. Michelle Lee at Human Services, Carrie Cruzy at Turning Point, Rich Gardner, and Mark Linenlaub over at Thrive Alliance. The folks over at Centerstone, Bob Bromley, manages the Columbus Homeless Outreach Program, and their caseworkers they've had have been tremendous, and we all work together very hard to address this. In social work, in sociology, homelessness is the one that no one wants to talk about, but it's the one everyone dreads because it is so complicated. And many of the people have 5 or 6 barriers at the same time, and it seems almost this knot that you're not going to be able to get untangled. But it's possible, and there are programs, there are model programs in the country that can help, can mitigate the problem, can minimize homelessness. And once we get them out, like I said, get them so they don't go back into homelessness again. We're making great strides. Sure, it's a problem. and it's probably always going to be a problem. We have a great economy in Columbus. It's almost we almost have negative unemployment. But you have to, if you have a mental illness or substance use disorder, it doesn't matter how many jobs are out there, because you can't keep. You might be able to find it, but you can't keep it. We have negative unemployment. We also have very high housing costs in Columbus. So if you're making it in Columbus, you're doing really well. If you're not, you're doing really not well. And it's a problem. There's huge benefits to having a booming economy. One of them is if you're mentally ill, or you can't support yourself, or you have a substance use disorder, an addiction to alcohol or drugs, it's really, really tough. But we have really good social service departments. We have really good social workers here in this community. And a lot of us are working very, very hard to solve this problem.
Okay, that's good information to know. Tasha and Joanne, does a trustee help families find a home? Say
Generally,
like they came in here and had the money, would you folks be able to help?
no, we don't work just like a real estate service. It's just difficult. It's time consuming. It takes a very long time to find a home. We have lists, and we can refer you to some landlords. Sure, if we know of one that's just being open, we'll say, yeah, we happen to know. But that's not something to necessarily keep track of, and it may change hourly. So it's very difficult to keep track of. But generally we'll have some landlords, probably not buying a home. We know generally which apartment complexes have which restrictions, which ones are easier. A lot of times we'll tell, well, there's this landlord, and the good thing about this landlord is they'll let anybody rent from them. But the bad part with this landlord is they'll let anybody rent from them.
Right.
And it's difficult. Yes, you can move in here. It'll be easy, but it's not really expensive. One of the other problems we have in Columbus is there isn't a lot of really inexpensive housing in Columbus. The really nice apartments aren't terribly more expensive than the really crummy apartments. The difference is just how restrictive it is to get into them, whether they'll rent to you or not. And it's based on criminal history and credit history and how many evictions you had. So if you don't have a lot of money, there's not a lot of really, really inexpensive housing in Columbus. There's just some places that you and I wouldn't want to live in. And it still takes some money. But somebody comes in here, we'll do what we can to advise them, but we don't really go out on a housing search with folks. Just don't have the personnel or the time or the skill set to do that.
All right. That was into our questions. How would someone want to contact either you or the trustee's office?
Well, we're at 1333 Washington Street. That's right across from Coca-Cola on Washington Street. We're open 8:30 to 4:30. We close noon to 1 for lunch. So we're really open 8:30 to noon and 1 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. So you can stop by anytime and talk to the receptionist, and she can make an appointment. Or leave a message if you need me to call you back or something. You can always call us at 812-372-8249. We answer the phone 8:30 to 4:30 every day, except for noon to 1 when we're closed for lunch. But if you call us, leave a message, and we'll call you right back, a caseworker or myself or whoever it is, if you need to get hold of us.
Okay. Do you happen to have any web addresses?
We do not. We have Columbus Township has a Facebook page. And if you send a message to that, I will get the message. You can send me an email also. I have an email address. It's bjackson@columbustownship.us.
Is there any additional information, such as special events coming up? You want to talk a little bit about Brighter Days?
Yeah, Brighter Days is our partnership with Love Chapel. Columbus Township owns the building. When I became trustee, we had a maintenance building for the fire department over off of Mapleton Drive, or Mapleton Lane, Mapleton Street, whatever it is, South Mapleton. It's on the way back to the city garage, just south of State Street there. We were maintaining the fire trucks there. We have a firehouse on Rep Drive that's manned during the day, and there's a second one up back behind Kenny Glass, up North 31, just north of Lowell Road there, that just has some, for the volunteers, has some equipment there in case there's a fire on that part, so volunteers can get to that firehouse and respond to the fire. The structure being maintained at a different building on Mapleton. I thought it was a success. We didn't need it. We tried to sell it. It was for sale for about a year and a half. We virtually no offers. At the same time, I was working with Love Chapel, and we were ramping up the amount of assistance we were given to the homeless here in town. We had a system, we were paying for hotel vouchers out at Days Inn and Hotel 6. We had some sleeping rooms we were renting, but they were unmonitored over off Cherry Street. So we decided to work together, and that just wasn't being effective. It wasn't safe, it was costing a fortune. It wasn't particularly appropriate clinically or in social work. It wasn't appropriate for what the homeless needed. So the building over there in Mapleton wasn't zoned, so we had to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals to have it a residential facility. They approved it, and then we got together. It was a huge community effort of renovating that building over at Brighter Days. We were amazed at the amount of skills and time people donated to doing that. Many contractors donated their labor, sometimes even their materials, but just their things, even from cutting the concrete, because we had to put in new sewer lines, to digging out the sewer lines, to putting in the sewer lines, to replacing the concrete, to building the walls, to putting the HVAC. All those things, contractors, I don't think we paid for any labor. We had to pay to put sprinklers in, but everyone donated their labor, and many people donated the materials to get it done over there. So we maintained it was a huge pole barn with offices on the side. There was a big block of bathrooms in the middle of it, on a poured concrete floor, which is difficult to put sewer lines in. A big block of institutional bathrooms in. Had a lot of help, particularly from a group here in town called Mission Columbus. It's actually a ministry at Asbury Methodist Church. A lot of engineers that work at Cummins. If you live in Columbus very long, you've run into several engineers. And it's project engineers and mechanical engineers and civil engineers and electrical engineers. Very process oriented, and it was very organized. They organized all the churches to have labor pools and coming in, and some of the subcontractors and the contractors organized the whole project. I was over there 2 or 3 days a week, and many Saturdays and some Sundays, just because we owned the building and I was in charge of renovating it. It was a great project. And I joke, we have the only, because a lot of the engineers were Cummins, we have the only homeless shelter in the world with the tolerance of a Cummins diesel engine. Very precise and very exact, and it looks great. And then after it got transformed, it's now operated by Love Chapel, who's our partner in that. That's the Ecumenical Assembly of Bartholomew County Churches. I believe it's 42 churches now belong to it. They all have Love Chapel, and they have the food pantry in their offices, but then they have paid staff that monitors it, and they organize all the volunteers. It's open 24/7. It's monitored 24/7. The folks can check in between 6 and 9 for intake every night, between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. They have to be out in the morning, generally by 9 p.m., unless there's something else going on. During the cold weather this winter, they've kept it open a couple days, especially over the holidays. There's no place else to go. So yeah, Brighter Day, that building is still part of the partnership. We maintain the building. We still own the building. We pay for the property insurance. They pay all the operational costs and pay the staff and organize the volunteers and all the toiletries and food and all the normal operating costs they handle over there. So,
Well, I want to thank you for the interview and your
anytime,
time.
anytime.